students, a lot has happened since my last update, and the legislature has a lot to get done before sine die next week. As you heard from Ms. Paulson, the fiscal committees wrapped up their work to keep bills moving through the legislative process, but they also cut short a few more dreams for the year. I only saw 4 bills drop off my personal tracker, which might mean I'm really good at predicting what bills will become law, or legislators are keeping a lot of bills alive even though we're in a short session, or both. Both chambers are super busy passing legislation, including SB 5884, which is very exciting. Legislators are going to keep going between the floor to vote and the caucus rooms to caucus until cutoff on Friday evening. Even more dreams will die very soon. We also saw some procedural action on the budget proposals from both the Senate and the House. So let's get into it. To recap, Senator Robinson and Representative Ormsby both released their supplemental operating budget proposals last week. The bills were heard in their respective fiscal committees, and then some changes were made during executive action. Then, each chamber spends time on the floor to adopt a few more changes and pass their budget over to the other chamber. The House then took things a step further because they put their language on the Senate budget bill and sent it back over. This tells us that the final budget bill number will be the one for the Senate, SB 5950. Anyway, all this back and forth happens because the budget needs to go through the legislative process just like any other bill, even though legislators will suspend the rules so they can move things along more quickly. We're technically probably in a concurrence period now. Honestly, I usually don't think about it that much because this is just how it goes every year. Legislators do all the steps, then budget writers hide somewhere on the Capitol campus for negotiations, and they don't say anything to anyone until they have a final budget deal. Something else that happens is the minority party, which is the Republicans, will often use committee or floor time to express their concerns about the budget. One thing that came up is an electricity bill rebate that would give certain households $200 each toward their electrical bill, and the funding comes from the Climate Commitment Act revenue. Remember what we've been telling you about the initiative that would repeal the Climate Commitment Act? Well, Republicans think this rebate is fishy because of the timing of it all, should the rebates be approved as part of the budget this year. I've also been hearing the transportation budget writers are not getting along this year, which could put that budget in jeopardy. One example of something that needs to be negotiated is the House likes to put in lots of pet projects for legislators, either in their district or on a topic they care about. Since there are more representatives, there's always more random projects in the House budget than in the Senate budget. Something I found in the operating budget for the Department of Fish and Wildlife is the House funds different projects on orcas, bears, wolves, and invasive mussels. The Senate doesn't do any of that, and these things aren't tied to legislation, so budget writers will have to decide what to keep and what to cut. Even though the budgets have been amended, I don't take the time to read each tiny new detail like we talked about last week until a final budget is released. There's way too much going on with bills to fret about the budget if I'm not trying to get something funded. If the proviso you care about wasn't in one of the original budget proposals, then you do have to scramble to get your legislative champion to add an amendment in before budget writers disappear for negotiations. And that's not a fun place to be. There's a lot more uncertainty that way. It's also generally better to see the proviso you care about in the Senate budget because they always spend less than the House does. You can think of the Senate budget as the minimum and the House budget as the maximum, and then the final budget will meet somewhere in the middle. That's all for today's update. Next time, I'll be back in studio at TVW. We'll be signing time, and there will be a lot of end of session activities to update you on. See you next time.